Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Austin Carter, and this was the 14th hour searching for Chloe Martinez on the trails of Pine Ridge National Forest, and my boots felt like they were filled with concrete as I stumbled through another grid section that should have been empty but somehow felt wrong in ways my ranger training never prepared me for. The GPS coordinates on my Garmin eTrex 20 showed 35.6892 degree N, 83, 324 W, Sector 7 Delta of the Appalachian Trail Extension, where 22-year-old Chloe Martinez had been last seen by her hiking partner before she'd wandered off to take photos of that weird old tree and never came back. My radio crackled with static as I keyed the mic. Unit 12 to base, still negative contact in grid 7 Delta, moving to 7 Echo over. The metallic taste of fear and too much black coffee coated my tongue as I waited for dispatch to acknowledge. Copy Unit 12, any sign cutting in your sector? Came the tired voice of Ranger Station Chief Martinez. No relation to our missing girl, just one of those cosmic jokes that made this whole nightmare feel personal. I shouldered my 65-pound pack, feeling every ounce of the emergency gear, first aid supplies, and rope rescue equipment that marked me as the guy they sent into the deep woods when shit got complicated. Negative on sign, Chief. Ground's too hard, and I paused, studying the forest floor through my wire-rimmed glasses, noting something that made my gut clench. Chief, the animal tracks just stop here, like everything just decided to leave this whole area. The silence stretched long enough that I thought I'd lost signal before Chief's voice came back strained. Repeat that, Carter. I knelt down, my knees cracking from hours of hiking, and examined the pine needle carpet more closely. Deer tracks, rabbit prints, even bird scratches in the dirt, all leading toward this section of forest, but none leading away. It was like nature itself had drawn a line in the earth and said no further. All animal sign terminates at approximately the same coordinates, Chief. Nothing natural about it. Roger that. Continue your sweep, Carter. Martinez family is... They're not handling this well. The weight of that statement hit me harder than my 40-pound pack. Mrs. Martinez had grabbed my uniform shirt that morning with fingernails digging into the polyester blend, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Please, Austin. She's all I have left since her father died. Please bring my baby home. I'd promised her I would, looking into those brown eyes that matched her daughter's perfectly, and felt the crushing responsibility settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. My stomach rumbled viciously. Hadn't eaten since the convenience store breakfast burrito at 5 a.m. 14 hours ago. The protein bar in my cargo pocket felt like cardboard in my mouth as I forced myself to eat, knowing my blood sugar was probably contributing to the shaky feeling in my hands. Or maybe it was something else entirely, because the temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees since I'd entered this grid section, and my breath was starting to fog despite it being mid-October in Tennessee. Chloe, I called out, my voice echoing strangely among the towering pines. Chloe Martinez, this is Ranger Carter with the National Park Service. The silence that came back wasn't normal forest quiet. It was the absolute absence of sound that made your ears ring and your skin crawl. No bird calls, no rustling leaves, no insect buzzing. Even my own footsteps seemed muffled, like the forest was swallowing sound itself. My Nokia 3310, indestructible but useless for GPS, showed 3 bars of signal, so I speed dialed the Martinez home number I'd memorized. Mrs. Martinez picked up on the first ring. Austin? Did you find her? Please tell me you found her. The raw desperation in her voice made my throat tighten. Not yet, Mrs. Martinez, but I'm not giving up. I need you to tell me again about that tree Chloe mentioned, the one she wanted to photograph. She said it looked like it was bleeding. Dark red sap or something. She thought it would make a good shot for her photography portfolio. A sob caught in her throat. She's applying to art school, Austin. She has so many dreams. I closed my eyes, feeling the crushing weight of that trust. I'm going to find her, ma'am. I promise you that. After ending the call, I consulted my topographical map, a real paper one, because unlike my colleagues who'd gone digital, I still believed in redundancy. There was an old growth section about 2 clicks northwest that might have unusual trees, but as I folded the map, my hands were shaking badly enough that I had trouble with the creases. The trail to the old growth section was barely visible, overgrown with blackberry vines that caught on my uniform and left dark stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. My headlamp, a Surefire G2X Pro, cut through the gathering dusk with 320 lumens of LED brightness. But somehow the shadows seemed to bend around the light in ways that made no geometric sense. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Austin Carter's situation? Comment below. That's when I saw her. She was standing in a small clearing, maybe 30 yards ahead, silhouetted against the dying light. Long dark hair, slender build, wearing what looked like a white hiking shirt. My heart hammered against my ribs as I called out, "Chloe? Chloe Martinez?" The figure turned, and even at this distance, I could see she was beautiful. Stunning in a way that made my breath catch despite the professional nature of this encounter. She raised one delicate hand and waved, then pointed deeper into the forest before disappearing behind a massive oak. "Wait!" I shouted, crashing through the underbrush toward where she'd been standing. Branches whipped across my face, leaving stinging cuts on my cheeks, and my glasses nearly flew off as I stumbled over a hidden root. But when I reached the clearing, there was no one there. I played my headlamp across the ground, looking for footprints, any sign of passage. What I found instead made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. The ground was covered in a perfect circle of dead pine needles, brown and brittle, as if something had drained the life from a 15-foot radius of forest floor. In the center of this dead zone sat a single object that made my rational, educated mind rebel against what my eyes were seeing. It was Chloe's digital camera, a Canon EOS Rebel T6 that I'd seen her mother clutch while showing me photos of her daughter. But the LCD screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and dark red liquid, too thick to be sap, too dark to be blood, dripped from the cracks onto the dead earth below. I keyed my radio with trembling fingers. Unit 12 to base. I've got evidence. Found the victim's camera in Sector 8 Alpha. Requesting immediate backup and crime scene team. Copy Unit 12. Carter, you need to get out of there now. We just got word from the local sheriff. There have been 3 missing persons cases in that exact area over the past 40 years. All young women. All attractive brunettes. The radio static seemed to form words. She's beautiful, isn't she, Austin? I spun around, heart hammering, but the voice was coming from the radio itself. Base, did you copy that transmission? Copy what, Carter? You're breaking up. Say again? I grabbed the camera with my tactical gloves, noting how it felt warm despite the October chill, and shoved it into my evidence bag. That's when I noticed the photos were still visible on the cracked screen. Dozens of shots of the same tree, a massive pine with bark that wept dark red resin like blood. But in the final photo, there was something else. A woman standing behind the tree, pale and beautiful, with eyes that seemed to glow even through the damaged LCD. She wanted to capture my beauty, came that voice again. Definitely not from the radio this time. Just like you want to, Austin. I spun toward the voice, my flashlight beam catching movement between the trees. She was there again, but closer now. Close enough to see that her beauty was wrong somehow. Too perfect, too symmetrical. Like a magazine photo that had been retouched beyond human possibility. Her skin was alabaster white and seemed to glow with its own inner light, and when she smiled I could see teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "You're not Chloe Martinez," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heartbeat. "No," she said, stepping into the full beam of my flashlight. Up close I could see that her white hiking clothes were actually an antique dress, something from the 1800s, and it was stained with dark patches that could have been sap or blood or something worse. "But I am wearing her face. Do you like it, Austin?" I chose it especially for you." The face shifted subtly, and for just a moment I was looking at Chloe Martinez, the same brown eyes from her mother's photographs, the same gentle smile. Then it shifted again, becoming someone else entirely, another beautiful young woman I didn't recognize. And again, and again. A parade of lovely faces, all worn like masks by something that was decidedly not human. "I've been waiting for you," she continued, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. "The smart one, the one who notices things others miss, the one who thinks with his mind instead of his other parts." My legs felt weak, and I realized with dawning horror that I was walking toward her despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Each step felt involuntary, like my body was no longer under my own control. The temperature around her was dropping with each foot I covered, and I could see my breath forming white clouds in the suddenly frigid air. What did you do to Chloe?" I managed to ask through chattering teeth. "The same thing I did to Rebecca in 1979, and Michelle in 1995, and Sarah in 2003. Her smile widened, showing more of those needle-sharp teeth. "I borrowed their beauty, Austin, their youth, their life force, and now they're part of me forever." She gestured to the massive pine tree behind her, and I could see now what Chloe had been photographing. The bark wasn't weeping sap, it was weeping faces. Dozens of them, the features of young women preserved in the red resin like insects in amber. All beautiful, all terrified, all very, very dead. And there, near the bottom of the trunk, was a face I recognized from the wallet photos Mrs. Martinez had shown me. Chloe's eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream, trapped forever in the tree's supernatural bark. "She fought, you know," the witch said conversationally. "They all do at first, but beauty calls to beauty, Austin, and I am so very beautiful." The compulsion hit me like a physical force, and I found myself dropping my radio, my backpack, my flashlight. My hands moved without my permission, reaching toward her perfect face. Part of my mind, the rational, educated part that had earned me a forestry degree and gotten me this job despite my colleagues thinking I was too bookish for field work, was screaming warnings. But that voice was getting quieter with each step I took toward her. "Fight it, Carter," I whispered to myself through gritted teeth. "Think. You're smarter than this. There has to be a pattern, a weakness, something." "Oh, Austin," she laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes made of bones. "Your intelligence is exactly why I chose you. The others were so easy, driven by base desires, simple to manipulate. But you'll be a challenge. And when I break that brilliant mind of yours, it will taste so much sweeter." My hand was inches from her face when I noticed something that made my analytical brain kick into overdrive. The photos on Chloe's camera. They showed the tree during daylight, but all the faces in the bark were clearly visible. Supernatural resin doesn't follow the rules of light and shadow, but the witch herself cast no shadow in my flashlight beam. "You're bound to the tree," I said suddenly, jerking my hand back. "That's why the missing persons all happened in this exact spot. You can't leave this area." Her perfect features twisted into something inhuman and furious. "Clever little ranger," she hissed, and her voice was no longer beautiful honey but the sound of grinding bones. "But cleverness won't save you when your body betrays your mind." Pain exploded through my skull as something invaded my thoughts. Not telepathy, but something far worse. It felt like icy fingers were rifling through my memories, finding every doubt, every insecurity, every moment of weakness. The teasing from my colleagues about being the nerd ranger, the way Chief Martinez always assigned me to desk work instead of the exciting field operations, the girlfriend who'd left me because I was too boring and spent more time with books than people. "You've always been weak, Austin," the witch whispered inside my head. "Always the outsider. The one who didn't quite fit. But I can make you powerful. I can make you beautiful. All you have to do is touch me, and all that pain will go away forever." My hand started moving toward her face again, and this time I couldn't stop it. The supernatural compulsion was overwhelming, crushing my will under its psychic weight. I was going to die here, just like Chloe, just like all the others. And Mrs. Martinez would never know what happened to her daughter. That thought, the image of Mrs. Martinez waiting by her phone, clutching Chloe's high school graduation photo, sparked something deep in my chest. Not supernatural power, but something more mundane and infinitely more powerful. Love. Not romantic love, but the fierce, protective love of someone who'd made a promise to a grieving mother. I told her I'd bring her daughter home, I growled, forcing my hand to stop just centimeters from the witch's face. And I keep my promises. The witch's eyes widened in surprise, and for the first time, I saw something like fear flicker across her perfect features. Impossible. No man has ever resisted me at this stage. Yeah, well, I said, using every ounce of willpower to step backward. My colleagues are right about one thing. I'm not like other men. I grabbed my flashlight from where I'd dropped it and played the beam across the tree trunk, studying the trapped faces with new eyes. There had to be a pattern, a logic to how she'd bound them. I'd spent years studying forest ecology, understanding the complex relationships between trees and their environment. This was just another ecosystem, a supernatural one. The faces, I said suddenly. They're not just trapped. They're still alive, aren't they? That's how you maintain your power. You're not just stealing their beauty, you're feeding off their life force continuously. Stop thinking, the witch shrieked, and the temperature dropped another 20 degrees. Ice began forming on the tree branches around us. Submit to me. But I was in my element now, solving puzzles, understanding systems. That's why you need the tree. It's not just a prison, it's a supernatural battery. And if I had to guess, I studied the patterns of resin flow, the way the faces were positioned. The flow follows the tree's vascular system. Disrupt that, and I pulled out my Pulaski tool, the combination axe and mattock that every wildland firefighter carries, and swung it hard into the base of the tree, right where the largest concentration of resin had pooled. The witch's scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Part human agony, part inhuman rage, part the sound of wood splitting. Dark red sap gushed from the wound I'd made, but this time it sparkled with flecks of light, like stars trapped in blood. You don't understand what you're doing, she gasped, and I could see her perfect beauty beginning to fade around the edges. If you free them, you'll die. The backlash will kill you. Maybe, I said, swinging the axe again, opening a larger wound in the supernatural bark. But they'll be free, and that's more important than my life. More light poured from the tree, and I could hear voices. Dozens of them, all the trapped women calling out in languages spanning decades. Some speaking with modern slang, others with the formal diction of earlier eras. They were all still there, still conscious, still suffering. I swung the axe a third time, and something inside the tree ruptured. The witch collapsed, her stolen beauty melting away like wax to reveal something ancient and withered beneath. Her true form was barely human, skin like old leather, eyes like black pits, fingernails grown into yellowed claws. Curse you, she whispered with her dying breath. Curse your analytical mind and your stubborn heart. May you never find peace in the natural world again. Light exploded from the tree trunk as decades of trapped souls were suddenly released. The faces in the bark dissolved, but instead of disappearing, they formed ghostly figures that stood around me in the clearing. Rebecca, from 1979, a hippie girl with flowers in her hair. Michelle from 1995, wearing a flannel shirt and combat boots. Sarah from 2003, with her digital camera and hiking gear. And Chloe Martinez, looking exactly like her graduation photo, young and beautiful and finally free. Thank you, she whispered, her voice like wind through pine needles. Tell my mother, tell her I love her, and that I'm okay now. One by one, the spirits faded into sparkles of light that drifted up toward the stars. But Chloe lingered for a moment longer. Austin, she said, you need to know. I'm not the only one she caught. Check the old mining caves 2 miles north. There are others, still alive. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the clearing with the corpse of something that had never been human. and the empty husk of a tree that had served as its supernatural prison for God only knew how long. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. Unit 12 to base. I need immediate backup medical teams and search and rescue at coordinates 35.71, 23 degree N, 83.51, 56 degree W. We've got survivors to extract from the old mining caves in Sector 9 Alpha. Carter, what the hell happened out there? We lost your signal for 20 minutes. I looked around the clearing, now completely normal except for the dead tree and the lingering smell of ozone. Long story, Chief, but I think we're going to find more than just Chloe Martinez. The rescue operation took 18 hours. We found 7 women in the mining caves, all young, all beautiful, all in various states of supernatural hibernation. They'd been kept alive but unconscious while the witch fed off their life force gradually. The oldest had been missing for 3 years. The newest had disappeared just 2 weeks ago. They all survived. Mrs. Martinez never got to hug her daughter again, but she got something almost as precious: the knowledge that Chloe was at peace, and that her death had led to saving 7 other daughters. At the funeral, she pressed something into my hand. Chloe's camera somehow repaired with one final photo on it. It showed me in the clearing, swinging the axe, surrounded by points of light that looked like stars. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was Chloe herself, smiling and giving me a thumbs up. I keep that photo in my ranger station office now, next to my forestry degree and my commendations. My colleagues still think I'm the nerd ranger, but they respect me in a way they never did before. Chief Martinez recommended me for the Congressional Medal of Honor for civilian heroism, though the official report had to be heavily edited. Sometimes late at night when I'm alone in the forest, I hear whispers in the wind. Not threatening whispers, grateful ones. The voices of women whose souls I helped free, letting me know that the wilderness is a little safer because one nerd ranger decided that knowledge and courage matter more than fitting in. And sometimes, when the moon is dark and the forest feels too quiet, I remember the witch's dying curse about never finding peace in the natural world again. Because she was wrong about that too. I found something better than peace. I found purpose. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Chloe Martinez. I read every single one. My name is Sam Carter, and at 6:47 a.m. on October 13, 2018, my radio crackled to life with the call that would drag me straight into hell itself. Unit 23, this is dispatch. We have a code 99, missing person report. 22-year-old male, Jordan Williams, last seen yesterday around 1600 hours near Devil's Canyon Trail, Blackwater National Forest. Family just called it in. You copy? I nearly choked on my gas station coffee, the bitter liquid burning my throat as adrenaline spiked through my bloodstream. 3 months on the job, and this was my first real missing person case. My hands shook slightly as I keyed the radio, trying to sound professional despite my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 23 responding. What's my LKP? Last known position. I'd been practicing the lingo, desperate to fit in with the veteran rangers who still looked at me like I was some college kid playing dress-up in a Smokey Bear hat. GPS coordinates 35.84199 degree N, 82.5651 degree W. Family says he was doing photography for some art project, left his car at the trailhead parking lot, blue Honda Civic, still there. Had a backpack, camera equipment, and was wearing a red North Face jacket. I scribbled the coordinates on my forearm with a Sharpie, old habit from my rookie training. The numbers burned into my skin like a brand. Devil's Canyon Trail. Even the name made my stomach clench with something that felt like ice water. Copy, ETA 15 minutes. I gunned my Ford Ranger, dust kicking up behind me as I tore down Forest Service Road 471, gravel pinging against the undercarriage like bullets. The morning air was crisp. October in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and normally I loved this shit. The smell of dying leaves, the way fog clung to the valleys like something alive. But today, Something felt wrong. The trees seemed too quiet, like they were holding their breath. Even the usual chatter of squirrels and birds had gone silent, leaving only the growl of my engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. My phone buzzed against my leg. A text from my girlfriend Sarah. "Good luck on your first week flying solo. Dinner at 7?" I smiled despite the knot in my gut. Sarah believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I'd promised her I'd be careful, that I'd prove myself worthy of this job. My finger hovered over the screen to text back, but the Honda Civic came into view and I forgot everything else. The car sat alone in the gravel parking area. Morning dew still beaded on the windshield. I parked behind it and stepped out, immediately hit by the smell, pine needles and wet earth, but underneath it something else. Something that made my nostrils flare with instinctive disgust, like meat left too long in the sun. I approached the Honda slowly, boots crunching on fallen leaves. The car was unlocked. Fucking typical of tourists who thought the mountains were some kind of Disney ride. Jordan's wallet sat in the cup holder. Driver's license showing a clean-cut kid with dark hair and an easy smile. College student from Charlotte. The back seat held camping gear, sleeping bag, protein bars, a thermos that still smelled like coffee. "Jordan Williams?" I called out, my voice echoing off the tree line. "Forest Service, if you can hear me, call out." Nothing. Not even an echo came back, like the forest had swallowed my words whole. I shouldered my day pack. 43 pounds of gear, including rope, first aid kit, emergency beacon, and enough water for 12 hours. My radio crackled with static as I keyed it up. "Dispatch Unit 23, I'm at the vehicle. Beginning sign cutting at coordinates 35.8419 Dioidin 82.565 I Wandig W. Vehicle appears undisturbed, personal effects inside." Copy Unit 23. Be advised, weather service is calling for thunderstorms this afternoon. Keep me posted every 30 minutes. I clicked acknowledgement and started examining the trailhead. Devil's Canyon Trail was a moderate hike, about 6 miles to the old settlement ruins where some religious nuts had built a church back in the 1890s before. Well, before bad things happened there. The rangers didn't like talking about it, but I'd heard whispers. Ritual murders, mass suicide. The kind of shit that made reasonable people avoid the area after dark. Jordan's tracks were easy to follow at first. Size 10 Merrill hiking boots. Deep tread pattern pressed into the soft earth near the creek crossing. But as I followed the trail deeper into the canyon, the prints became harder to read. The ground grew rocky and scattered leaves obscured the sign. I'd been hiking for maybe an hour when I found the first piece of Jordan's gear. A lens cap, Nikon, sitting in the middle of the trail like someone had just dropped it. I bagged it in an evidence pouch, protocol, but my hands were already starting to shake. The forest around me had grown even quieter, if that was possible. No bird calls, no insect buzz. Even the wind had died to nothing. "Jordan," I called again, louder this time. "Jordan Williams." This time I heard something. A sound that made every hair on my arm stand up straight. It was faint, distant, but it sounded like singing. High and sweet, almost like a child's voice, drifting down from somewhere higher on the canyon wall. I checked my GPS, 35.8395 degree N, 82.5632 degree W. Still 2 miles from the old church ruins, but the singing seemed to be coming from that direction, carrying on air that suddenly felt thick as soup. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch Unit 23. I found personal effects belonging to the missing person. Continuing search toward grid 77 Alpha. Copy Unit 23. Any sign of the subject?" I hesitated. How do you report that you're hearing phantom children singing in a forest where children shouldn't be? Negative on visual contact. Still following sign. The lie tasted like copper pennies on my tongue. 20 minutes later, I found Jordan's camera. It was smashed. Not dropped. Smashed. The expensive DSLR body had been beaten against something hard enough to crack the LCD screen and scatter pieces of the lens across 10 feet of trail. But it was the photos still stored in the memory card that made my blood turn to ice water. I scrolled through them on the camera's damaged screen, squinting at the fractured display. Jordan had been photographing the forest, standard nature shots, until he got close to the church. Then the photos changed. The first shot of the church looked normal enough. Old stone building, Gothic windows, bell tower collapsed on one side. But in the next photo, taken maybe 30 seconds later according to the timestamp, there were shadows in the windows, shadows that looked like people. The third photo made me gag. The shadows weren't in the windows anymore. They were standing outside the church, and they were wrong, twisted. Their limbs bent at angles that human joints don't bend, faces smeared into expressions of agony and rage. And in the center of the group, clear as day, stood Jordan Williams. Except Jordan's face was wrong too. His mouth hung open in a scream, but his eyes were solid black, and they seemed to be looking directly at the camera, at me. I nearly dropped the camera, my hands slick with sweat that had nothing to do with the October chill. The singing was getting louder now, more voices joining in, and I could make out words. Come to the church, come to the light. Join us forever in endless night. What the fuck, I whispered, my voice cracking like a teenager's. This wasn't in any of my training manuals, this wasn't natural. My radio squawked, Unit 23, status report. I tried to answer, but my throat had gone desert dry. I managed to croak out, Unit 23, I'm continuing toward the church ruins. Found damaged camera equipment. Copy. Be advised, storm front moving in faster than expected. You have maybe 2 hours before we need you to RTB. Return to base. The smart thing would be to turn around right now, hike back to my truck and call in a full search team. But the smart thing felt like cowardice, and I could already imagine the looks from the veteran rangers. The rookie who got spooked and ran at the first sign of trouble. Besides, Jordan was still out there somewhere, and whatever was happening to him in those photos, it looked like he needed help. Fast. I shouldered the broken camera and kept climbing. The trail to the church wound up through stands of dying oak and hickory, their leaves the color of dried blood in the filtered afternoon light. With each step, the wrongness in the air grew thicker. My skin felt crawly, like invisible insects were dancing across my arms and neck. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees and my breath was starting to mist. Then I smelled it. The same rotten meat stench from the parking lot, but stronger. Much stronger. It rolled down the canyon like a physical thing, making my eyes water and my stomach lurch. I pulled my bandana up over my nose, but it didn't help much. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Sam Carter's situation? Comment below. The church appeared through the trees like something out of a nightmare. It was bigger than I'd expected, maybe 60 feet long and 30 wide, built from local fieldstone that had turned black with age and weather. The bell tower had indeed collapsed, probably decades ago, leaving a jagged stump that looked like a broken tooth. Gothic windows stared down at me like dead eyes, their glass long since shattered and scattered. But it was the door that made my knees weak. The heavy wooden door stood wide open, and from inside came a light that had no business existing. It wasn't electric, too warm and flickering for that. More like firelight, but brighter than any fire should be. And the singing was coming from inside, dozens of voices now. Men and women and children all harmonizing in that same hypnotic melody. Come to the church, come to the light, join us forever in endless night. Leave behind flesh, leave behind bone. Here in our darkness, you're never alone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my radio. Dispatch, Unit 23. I've reached the church ruins at grid 88 Alpha. I can see light inside the structure. Copy, Unit 23. Light source? How could I explain what I was seeing? Unknown. Requesting backup at my location. Negative, Unit 23. All other units committed to vehicle accident on Highway 19. You're flying solo until at least 1700 hours. Alone. Of course I was alone. Story of my fucking life. I approached the church doorway slowly, every survival instinct I had screaming at me to run. But Jordan was in there. I could hear his voice now, mixed in with the others, calling my name. Sam, Sam Carter. Help me, Sam. The stone threshold was worn smooth by generations of feet, and carved into it were symbols I didn't recognize. They looked old, older than the church itself, and they seemed to writhe and shift when I looked at them directly. The light from inside was so bright it hurt to look at, but I forced myself to peer around the door frame. What I saw inside made me vomit. The interior of the church had been gutted, pews ripped out and arranged in a circle around what had once been the altar. But the altar had been changed. It was covered in dark stains that could only be blood, some of it dried to black crust, some of it still wet and reflecting the impossible light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. And around the altar, arranged like a congregation from hell, sat the missing people. There had to be 20 of them, maybe more. Men, women, children, all sitting perfectly still in the ruined pews, their faces turned toward the altar in rapt attention. Their clothes spanned decades. I saw a woman in a 1950s dress, a man in disco-era polyester, a teenage girl in early 2000s low-rise jeans. All of them had been here far longer than should have been possible, but it was their eyes that made me puke again, retching until nothing came up but bile. Their eyes were gone, not closed, not damaged, gone. Empty sockets wept streams of black fluid that had stained their cheeks like tears of tar. And they were all singing, their mouths moving in perfect unison despite having no eyes to see the conductor. Jordan Williams sat in the front pew. He still wore his red North Face jacket, but it was torn now, hanging in bloody ribbons that exposed the raw meat underneath. His hiking boots were gone, and his bare feet were twisted at angles that made me bite my tongue to keep from screaming. Black fluid ran from his empty eye sockets down his cheeks, but he was smiling and singing along with the rest of them. "Sam," he said without turning around, his voice carrying despite the singing. "Sam Carter, I've been waiting for you." I tried to run. God help me, I tried to turn around and get the hell out of there. But my feet wouldn't move. Something held them to the stone floor like they'd been nailed down. The singing grew louder, more insistent, and I felt something in my head start to loosen. "Come to the church, come to the light." "No," I whispered, fighting against whatever was trying to crawl into my skull. "No, fuck that. Fuck all of this." I managed to lift one foot, then the other, taking stumbling steps backward toward the door. But with each step, the singing got louder, and I could feel something behind me. Something big and patient and hungry. I spun around, and there she was. The woman was beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers are beautiful, perfect and terrible and wrong. She stood maybe 6 feet tall, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair black as the space between stars. She wore a simple white dress that might have been a wedding gown or a burial shroud, but it was her smile that made my bladder let go, warm piss running down my legs as I stared into her face. Her smile was too wide, stretching from ear to ear and filled with teeth like broken glass. And her eyes were holes in reality, showing not empty sockets but an endless void that seemed to pull at my sanity like a riptide. "Welcome, Samuel," she said, her voice like honey poured over razor blades. "We've been waiting for you. Your predecessor was so helpful in preparing your arrival." "My predecessor?" She gestured toward the congregation, and I saw him then, sitting in the back pew. Ranger uniform, weathered face, name tag that read, Morrison. The guy I'd replaced, the guy who'd transferred to another district according to my supervisor. Except Morrison's uniform was rotted through, and mushrooms were growing from the holes in his flesh. He'd been here a long time. "You see, Samuel, this church requires a guardian, someone to guide the lost souls to us, someone in authority, someone people trust." Her smile widened impossibly. Rangers work so well for this purpose. I tried to key my radio, but my hands wouldn't obey. The woman, the thing, stepped closer, and I could smell her now. Death and decay and something else, something that made my hindbrain gibber with terror. "Jordan Williams was just the beginning," she continued conversationally. "One soul to feed the hunger, to strengthen the bonds that hold this place together. But we need more. So many more. And you, dear Samuel, will help us find them. I won't, I managed to croak. I won't do it. She laughed, and the sound was like children screaming down a well. Oh, but you will, because if you don't, we'll start with the people you love. Sarah, isn't it? Such a pretty name. She works at the veterinary clinic on Main Street, drives a silver Honda Accord, license plate LNV 4782. She has a mole on her left shoulder and she talks in her sleep. The bottom dropped out of my world. This thing, this impossibility, knew about Sarah. Knew details that I'd never told anyone. You've been watching me. We've been preparing you. Every ranger who works this district comes here eventually. The forest calls to them, guides them, feeds them to us. You're not the first, Samuel, and you won't be the last. The congregation had stopped singing now, and in the silence I could hear something else. Something that made my knees buckle. Screaming. It was coming from below. From underneath the church. A chorus of voices raised in agony and despair, the sound of souls in torment. And among them, rising above the rest, I heard a voice I recognized. Jordan Williams, the real Jordan Williams, was down there, still alive, still suffering. The basement, I whispered. The woman nodded approvingly. Very good. Yes, the basement is where we keep the fresh ones while they ripen. The conversion process takes time, you understand? The soul must be properly prepared before it can join our congregation. She gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind the ruined altar. As I watched, the door swung open on hinges that shrieked like the damned. Stone steps led down into absolute darkness, and the screaming grew louder. Go ahead, Samuel. Meet your first charge. I found myself walking toward the door, my body moving without my permission. Each step felt like I was walking through quicksand, but I couldn't stop. The thing in the white dress followed behind me, humming that awful song. The basement was worse than the church above. It was a charnel house, a place where human bodies were stored like sides of beef. They hung from hooks driven into the stone walls, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, in various stages of decay and conversion. Some still moved, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Others had progressed further, their flesh melting and reforming into new and terrible shapes. But in the center of the room, chained to a stone table, was Jordan Williams. He was still recognizably human, but barely. His fingers had been changed, stretched into long claws that scraped against the stone. His teeth had grown into fangs, and his eyes, his real eyes, not the empty sockets I'd seen upstairs, rolled in their sockets like those of a panicked horse. Please, he gasped when he saw me. Please kill me, don't let them finish, please. The woman in white laughed again. Now, Jordan, no need to be rude to our guest. Samuel is here to help with your transformation. She handed me a knife. It was old, the blade black with age and use, the handle carved from what looked like human bone. The weight of it in my hand felt wrong, like it was eager to cut, to spill blood. One small cut, she whispered in my ear, her breath like grave dirt, just a tiny incision on his forehead. It will help the process along, make it easier for him. More humane. I looked down at Jordan, at the terror in his eyes, at the way his changed fingers clawed desperately at his restraints. The knife felt warm in my hand, alive almost, and I could hear it whispering to me in a language I didn't understand, but somehow knew. Do it. Cut him. Feed us. Join us. Become us. I raised the knife, and in that moment, I thought of Sarah, not just her name or her face, but everything about her. The way she hummed while making coffee in the morning, how she always stole the blankets but somehow never stayed warm, the scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike as a kid, the way she believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Love, pure, simple, human love, and it burned through whatever spell or compulsion the thing had laid on me like sunlight through fog. Instead of cutting Jordan, I spun around and drove the knife into the woman's chest. She screamed, and the sound shattered windows that had been broken for decades. Black blood poured from the wound, hissing where it hit the stone floor. But she didn't die. If anything, she looked more amused than hurt. "Oh, Samuel," she said, pulling the knife from her chest like it was a splinter. "You still don't understand. You can't hurt me with weapons forged in this place. This knife belongs to us. Everything in this church belongs to us." She was right. The blade had already gone dull, the metal crumbling to rust in her pale hands. But I wasn't done fighting. I grabbed the chain holding Jordan to the table and threw my full weight against it. The ancient iron creaked but held. The woman laughed and started walking toward me, her form beginning to change. Her beautiful face melted and ran like wax, revealing something underneath that my mind refused to process. Clever boy. But iron blessed by pain and sacrifice is stronger than iron blessed by love. You cannot... I pulled out my cell phone. 2018 technology. GPS coordinates, emergency beacon, and most importantly, a direct line to dispatch. My thumb found the speed dial as the thing that had been a beautiful woman reached for me with fingers that had become tentacles. "Dispatch Unit 23, Mayday, Mayday. I'm in the church basement. GPS coordinates 35.8384 degree N, 82, 5689 degree W. Multiple missing persons, hostile unknown, requesting immediate backup and medical." The transmission went through. I know it went through because the thing stopped reaching for me and let out a shriek that brought chunks of stone raining down from the ceiling. For the first time since I'd entered this nightmare, it looked afraid. "No," it hissed. "No outside voices. No signals in our sacred space." But it was too late. I could hear voices coming through my radio. Dispatch, other rangers, maybe even state police. The outside world was breaking into this pocket of hell, and the thing couldn't stop it. The congregation upstairs had started screaming. "You don't understand what you've done," the thing snarled, its form shifting between woman and shadow and something else entirely. "This place exists between spaces, between times. Your call has torn the boundaries. The things we've kept contained will spill out into your world. The hunger will spread." I didn't care. Let the world deal with whatever came next. Right now I had one job. Get Jordan Williams out of here alive. I grabbed a piece of broken stone and started hammering at the chain links. The thing lunged for me, but as it moved, its form began to waver and break apart. The radio chatter was like acid to it, each burst of static making it scream and retreat. Unit 23, this is State Police Aviation. We have your location, ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I just had to survive 3 minutes. The chain snapped. Jordan fell off the table, his changed hands scrabbling at the stone floor. He was hurt bad, bones broken, blood loss, and whatever they'd done to change him, but he was conscious and moving. "Can you walk?" I asked. He tried to stand and fell immediately, his legs not working right. I got under his arm and hauled him upright, feeling his claws dig into my shoulder through my uniform shirt. Together we stumbled toward the stairs. The thing blocked our path. It had given up trying to maintain human form. What stood before us now was pure nightmare, a writhing mass of shadow and hunger with too many teeth and eyes that burned like dying stars. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "You cannot leave. No one leaves. Join us willingly or be torn apart and fed to the basement." I could hear helicopter rotors now getting closer. The thing heard them too, and its rage made the walls bleed. "Sam," Jordan whispered, his voice thick with pain. "The symbols on the threshold. They're containment marks, binding circles. If you can break them." I looked back at the doorway leading upstairs. Even from here I could see the carved symbols glowing with that same impossible light. Some kind of supernatural prison, keeping the thing trapped in this place. "If I break them, does that set it free?" Jordan nodded weakly. "But also breaks its power. It can't maintain this space without the bindings. Church will collapse back into normal reality." The thing lunged for us. I threw myself and Jordan to the side, feeling claws rake across my back. My uniform shirt tore and blood ran hot down my spine. But I stayed upright, and I kept moving. We made it to the stairs. The climb up was a nightmare of pain and terror. Jordan could barely move, and the thing followed us, reaching with tentacles that stretched impossibly long. Twice it grabbed my ankle, and twice I managed to kick free, leaving it holding pieces of my boot. The helicopter was directly overhead now, rotors thundering. I could hear voices shouting, boots on stone outside, but they couldn't enter the church. Some kind of barrier held them back, invisible but solid as a wall. I dragged Jordan across the church floor, past the congregation of eyeless dead who had started to moan and reach for us with grasping fingers. The threshold was 10 feet away. 5 feet. 3. The thing grabbed Jordan around the waist and started pulling him back. "Let him go!" I screamed, grabbing Jordan's arms and pulling the other way. It became a grotesque tug of war, with Jordan as the rope. He screamed, his ribs cracking under the pressure. That's when I saw the emergency flare on my belt. Standard Ranger equipment, magnesium flare, burns at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, bright enough to signal aircraft from 20 miles away. I ripped it free, pulled the striker, and jammed the burning white-hot tip directly into the carved symbols on the threshold. The world exploded. Light brighter than the sun flooded the church. The thing let out a shriek that shattered my eardrums, and I felt rather than heard the stone walls beginning to crack and crumble. The binding symbols were melting under the flare's heat, their power unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread. I grabbed Jordan and dove through the doorway. We hit the ground outside hard, rolling down the stone steps as the church came apart behind us. The impossible light flickered and died, replaced by normal October afternoon sunshine that looked gray and pale after what we'd seen inside. The congregation's screaming cut off abruptly, and I heard the sound of dozens of bodies hitting the floor. Strong hands grabbed me, pulling me away from the collapsing building. State police, EMTs, other rangers. I tried to tell them about the thing in the basement, about Jordan needing medical attention, but my voice was gone. Shock, probably. Jordan was unconscious but breathing. The EMTs loaded him onto a stretcher, and I caught a glimpse of his hands as they strapped him down. Normal hands. Human hands. Whatever changes had been done to him had reversed when the binding circle broke. A state police detective tried to interview me at the scene, but I wasn't much help. How do you explain what we'd seen? How do you put supernatural horror into a police report? I gave him the basics. Found Jordan in the church basement, building collapsed, possible gas leak causing hallucinations. He didn't believe me, but he didn't have a better explanation either. 3 months later, Jordan Williams made a full recovery with no memory of what happened in the church basement. The official report blamed his disappearance on a climbing accident and hypothermia-induced delirium. The church ruins were declared structurally unsound, and the area was closed to the public indefinitely. I requested a transfer to a different district. But sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed next to Sarah, I can still hear it. That singing, drifting in on the wind from the mountains, calling to me, promising that I can come back anytime, that there are other churches, other places where the boundaries are thin, other people to feed to the darkness. My name is Sam Carter. And I learned something that first week on the job that they don't teach in ranger training. There are things in the deep woods that don't belong to our world. Ancient things that have been waiting in the spaces between spaces for longer than human civilization has existed. And they're always hungry. They're always waiting. And sometimes when the wind is just right and the moon is dark, I can hear them singing my name. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Jordan Williams in that basement. I read every single one. My name is Tyler Hayes, and the broken voice of Rachel Stone's mother on the phone still echoes in my head 3 days later. "Please, Tyler," she had whispered between sobs. "You're the only one who still believes she's alive. Everyone else has given up. But you know these mountains better than anyone." The weight of 15 years as a veteran ranger at Olympic National Park had never felt as heavy as it did in that moment, when I promised Sandra Stone that I wouldn't stop until I found her 22-year-old daughter. Rachel Stone had disappeared 7 days ago during a solo hike on the Hoh River Trail, a route I knew like the back of my hand. and had never presented serious problems in my entire career. But there was something different about this case. Something that made my stomach twist every time I looked at the GPS coordinates where she was last seen. 47.8606 degree N, 123.9348 degree Yao, just 200 meters before the confluence with the old Bone Creek Trail, which had been officially closed in 1987 after a series of unexplained accidents. At 05:30 on a cloudy Friday morning in October 2019, I adjusted my Osprey Atmos 65 backpack, checked my Motorola APX 6000 radio for the third time, and sent one last message to my wife Jennifer. Heading out to search for Rachel. I love you. I'll be home for dinner. The bitter irony of that promise still burns in my throat whenever I remember it, because what I found on that trail fundamentally changed my understanding of what it means to be home in a world where the laws of physics can be violently torn apart by forces that should remain dead. The sun had barely risen when I parked my 2018 Chevy Silverado at the end of Forest Road 101, the same spot where Rachel had left her blue Honda Civic a week before. The morning air carried the familiar scent of wet moss and cedar bark, but there was something else. A subtle metallic odor that made my nostrils burn and sent warning signals from my experienced ranger brain that I didn't yet know how to interpret. My first stop was mile marker 2.3 on the trail, where a family of campers had last seen Rachel, walking determinedly north with her shocking pink REI Flash 55 backpack. Her footprints were still visible in the hardened mud. Nike Air Max 270 sneakers size 8, a pattern I'd memorized from police reports. I knelt and touched one of the impressions with my gloved finger, feeling the texture of earth that had been disturbed by her passage. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. There were other footprints overlapping hers, prints from worn military boots that seemed to have been made decades ago, but which somehow remained perfectly preserved in the wet mud. I followed the dual trail for 45 minutes, my Garmin eTrex 30X GPS recording every coordinate as the path serpentined through giant ferns and moss-covered fallen logs. The forest silence was unnatural. No bird songs, no squirrel rustling, just the muffled sound of my Danner Mountain 600 boots against the wet ground and the occasional dripping of condensed moisture falling from tree canopies 30 meters high. It was at 07:42 that I found the first physical evidence of Rachel's disappearance. Her stainless steel hydro flask water bottle, dented as if it had been crushed by immense force, carelessly thrown beside the main trail. I picked up the bottle with trembling hands and immediately felt a wave of nausea when I realized the metal was warm to the touch, despite the morning temperature of about 6 degrees Celsius. And there was something dark and viscous dripping from the mouth that definitely wasn't water. Unit 23 to Central, I spoke into the radio, my voice more tense than I would have liked to admit. Found physical evidence of the missing victim. Water bottle located at coordinates 47.8591 degree and 123.9362 degree Albu, requesting forensic team support. Central's response came loaded with static. Copy, Unit 23. Forensic team is busy with another incident. Continue search and report any developments. Watch terrain conditions. It was while putting away the radio that I heard it for the first time. A sound that shouldn't exist in a silent forest. Human voices echoing in the distance, coming from a direction my Sunto MC2 compass indicated as northeast, exactly where topographic maps showed the sealed entrance to Bone Creek Trail. The voices were muffled and distorted, but distinctly one of them seemed to be a young woman screaming for help with growing desperation. I abandoned any pretense of protocol and ran toward the screams, my backpack bouncing violently against my back as I forced my way through dense vegetation. Low branches scratched my face and tore my flannel shirt, leaving trails of warm blood on my skin that I would only notice hours later. The sound of voices always seemed to be 50 meters away, no matter how fast I ran, as if they were moving at the same speed as me in a parallel direction through the trees. When I finally reached the area where I thought the screams were coming from, I found myself in a small clearing that didn't appear on any of my maps. In the center of the clearing, half hidden by 25 years of lush fern and moss growth, was a rotted wooden sign that still maintained legible hand-painted letters. Bone Creek Trail, closed by order of Forest Service, entry prohibited. But what made my stomach twist into tight knots wasn't the sign itself, but what was scattered around it. Dozens of personal items that seemed to have been left by hikers over decades. Broken sunglasses from the 80s, a yellowed Sony Walkman still with a cassette tape inside, a Motorola flip phone from the 90s, a 2005 Canon PowerShot digital camera, and in the middle of it all, shining as if it had been dropped yesterday, Rachel Stone's iPhone XS in its pink protective case with unicorn stickers. I picked up the phone with visibly trembling hands, and when I pressed the side button, the screen lit up showing 73% battery and dozens of unread messages. The most recent was a voice audio sent 3 hours ago to the contact mom. "Mom, I don't know where I am. The trail doesn't stop. I've been walking for hours and I always come back to the same place. There's a man here who says he can help me, but there's something wrong with him. His eyes, my God, Mom, his eyes are completely white, and when he smiles I can see that all his teeth have been broken. If you get this, please, don't let anyone come looking for me on the old trail. He's waiting for more people." The audio cut off abruptly with the sound of breaking branches and Rachel screaming, a scream that was muffled as if something had forcibly covered her mouth. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Tyler Hayes' situation? Comment below. My 15 years of ranger training told me to return immediately, call reinforcements, and wait for support before entering a known dangerous area. But Sandra Stone's broken voice echoing in my mind and the desperation evident in Rachel's message overwhelmed any sense of self-preservation I still possessed. I sent my GPS location to Central, recorded an audio message explaining what I had found, and activated my Spot Gen 3 emergency beacon before heading to the nearly invisible entrance of Bone Creek Trail. The difference between the normal forest and what lay beyond that sign was immediately perceptible. The air was at least 5 degrees colder, dense enough that I could see my breath, and loaded with a smell of decomposition that didn't come from dead leaves or rotting logs, but from something fundamentally more disturbing. It was the smell of human flesh in an advanced state of putrefaction, mixed with a sweet metallic odor I recognized from my worst nightmares about climbing accidents that ended badly. The trail itself seemed to have been maintained by someone or something, despite being officially abandoned for more than 3 decades. The path was clear of invasive vegetation, loose stones had been carefully removed, and there were handmade trail markers carved in branches that definitely weren't Forest Service standard. Each marker showed a simple but deeply disturbing symbol, a human silhouette walking toward a circle, with arrows indicating that the only possible movement was forward. I had walked about 500 meters when I found the first physical evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with that trail. A giant cedar tree, at least 200 years old, had been cut clean at chest height, but the cut surface was perfectly smooth, as if it had been made with a supernatural blade too sharp to exist. Even more disturbing, the sap flowing from the cut was dark red, almost black, and when a drop fell on my boot, the leather began to smoke and dissolve where the liquid had touched. That's when I heard the footsteps for the first time, the unmistakable sound of heavy military boots marching in constant rhythm, coming from somewhere behind me on the trail. I turned quickly, hand instinctively going to the Glock 22 pistol in my holster, but the trail behind me was completely empty. However, the sound of footsteps continued, getting louder and louder as if something invisible was rapidly approaching my position. "Identify yourself," I shouted, my voice echoing strangely among the trees, as if sound waves were being distorted by something I couldn't comprehend. The sound of footsteps stopped abruptly, but was replaced by something much worse, the sound of labored breathing, as if something large and wounded was panting right behind my left ear. I spun in a complete circle, weapon drawn, but there was nothing visible within a 30-meter radius. What there was a tangible physical sensation of being watched by something with malevolent intentions, a presence that made every hair on my body stand up and cold sweat run down my spine in icy streams. That's when I saw the footprints forming in the mud ahead of me, military boot impressions appearing from nowhere, one after another, heading toward the trail ahead. The footprints were too deep for any normal person, as if whatever was making them weighed much more than it should. And there was a dark stain spreading around each impression that smelled intensely of coagulated blood, and something chemical that reminded me of formaldehyde. I followed the invisible footprints for another 200 meters, my heart beating so hard I could hear it echoing inside my skull, until I reached a fork in the trail that definitely didn't exist on any map I'd ever seen. To the left, the trail continued north, marked with a wooden sign that read, "Exit, 2.3 km." To the right, the trail descended steeply toward an obscure valley, marked with a sign that made my blood freeze. Eternus Trail, no return. The invisible footprints turned distinctly to the right, toward the trail marked as no return. And that's when I heard Rachel Stone's voice echoing from the valley below, clear as if she were screaming directly in my ear. "Tyler! Tyler Hayes! I know you're there! Please help me! He won't let me stop walking. My legs are bleeding, but he won't let me stop." Any hesitation I still had evaporated instantly. I completely ignored the warning sign and launched myself down the trail, sliding on some loose stones and grabbing branches to maintain balance as I descended into the valley that appeared to have been excavated by geological forces that didn't follow natural laws of erosion and rock formation. The descent took about 10 minutes, and with each meter I descended, the temperature dropped and sunlight seemed to be absorbed by something in the surrounding trees, creating a kind of artificial twilight even though it was still mid-morning. When I finally reached the bottom of the valley, I found myself in a perfectly flat circular area, surrounded by steep cliffs about 20 meters high, with only one visible exit, a narrow opening between rocks marked with a sign that simply read, "Eternus Trail Continues." In the center of the circular area was something that made my stomach violently twist, a campfire that was still burning, despite there being no signs that anyone had lit it recently. Around the campfire, arranged in a perfect circle, were 12 pairs of hiking boots from different eras, from leather boots from the 60s to modern trail sneakers that looked like they'd been bought the week before. All the boots still contained human feet, cut clean at ankle height with white bones gleaming through decomposing flesh. And there, on the far side of the macabre circle, were Rachel Stone's shocking pink Nike sneakers, still firmly tied, but with fresh blood abundantly flowing from where her ankles had been cut with surgical precision. The sound that came from my throat at that moment wasn't human. It was a primitive roar of rage and horror that echoed off the cliffs and returned multiplied, as if the valley itself was screaming with me. I ran to her sneakers and knelt, touching the still warm blood with trembling fingers when I heard a voice behind me that made every cell in my body contract with terror. "She was very brave, you know," said the voice, deep and harsh as if it came from a throat that had been crushed and poorly healed. "She walked for 3 days before finally accepting there was no exit. Most people accept much faster." I turned slowly, hand on my weapon, and saw for the first time the entity that had been responsible for the closure of Bone Creek Trail in 1987. It was humanoid, but fundamentally wrong in every aspect that mattered. It wore a Forest Service Ranger uniform that I recognized as being from the 80s style, but the fabric was soaked with blood and torn by countless holes that seemed to have been made by claws or fangs. Its face had been human once, but was now a mass of necrotic flesh and exposed bone, with completely white eyes that still managed to convey a malevolent intelligence that observed me with predatory interest. "Ranger Daniel Morrison," he said, making a grotesque caricature of a military salute. "Died in service on August 15, 1987, after falling into a ravine while searching for a lost child. But death, I discovered, is just a job change. Now I help lost people in a much more permanent way." I drew my weapon and pointed it directly at his chest, but he just laughed, a sound like glass being ground in a rusty gear. "Bullets don't work very well on people who are already dead, Ranger Hayes. But I admire your dedication." Rachel tried to fight at first too, broke 3 fingers on my teeth before realizing that resistance only made everything more painful. "Where is she?" I growled, though my voice was trembling in a way that compromised any authority I hoped to convey. "What did you do to her?" Morrison pointed to the narrow opening between the rocks. "She's walking the eternal trail now, along with all the others I've found over the years. The trail never ends, you see. It continues forever, going up and down the same mountain, passing the same landmarks, encountering the same obstacles. And every time they try to leave the trail or stop to rest, I'm there to encourage them to continue. That's when I began to hear, coming from the opening between the rocks, the sounds of multiple people walking, dozens of pairs of feet marching in constant rhythm, interspersed with occasional groans of pain and whispered pleas for rest that would never come. And underneath it all, clear and unmistakable, Rachel Stone's voice counting in a low voice. 2,347, 2,348, 2,349, as if she were counting each step of a journey that would never end. Morrison began moving in my direction, and that's when I realized his feet weren't touching the ground. He was floating about 5 centimeters above the surface, leaving only the impressions of those military boots I had followed. His hands, which had been hidden behind his back, were now visible, and where there should have been fingers, there were bone claws at least 15 centimeters long, covered with fresh blood and small pieces of fabric I recognized as being from the jacket Rachel wore in her ID photo. "You have a choice, Tyler Hayes," he said, his voice echoing in a way that seemed to come from all directions at once. "You can join the Eternal Walk voluntarily, and I promise it will be relatively painless, or you can try to fight and discover that there are forms of suffering that are still beyond your darkest imagination." I looked at the severed feet around the campfire, thought of Sandra Stone's voice begging for my help, and felt a pure and primitive rage grow in my chest like a fire fueled by high-octane fuel. "There's a third option," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "I break this curse and take Rachel home." Morrison tilted his head to the side, a movement that made his neck bones crack audibly and nauseously. "And how do you intend to do that, Ranger? You're in my domain now, governed by my rules." That's when I remembered something my grandfather, also a ranger, had told me when I was a child. A story about trapped spirits who could only rest when confronted with the truth about their deaths. "You said you died looking for a lost child," I spoke, slowly backing toward the rock wall to avoid being surrounded. "But I checked the records before coming here. There was no missing child reported in August 1987. The expression on Morrison's mutilated face changed, and for a moment I saw something that seemed to be genuine confusion. There was a child, a girl. She was crying in the forest, lost." "You saw what you wanted to see," I continued, feeling I was on the right track. "You were alone, depressed, looking for a purpose. So you created an imaginary child to save and ended up killing yourself chasing a fantasy. And now you're killing innocent people to avoid facing the truth about your own failure." The roar that came from Morrison made the surrounding rocks tremble, and he launched himself in my direction with speed that should have been impossible for anything human or non-human. His claws tore through the air where my head had been a second before, leaving 15-centimeter deep grooves in the solid stone behind me. I rolled to the side and ran toward the opening between the rocks, but he appeared in front of me instantly, blocking my exit. "You won't take this from me," he screamed, his voice now a cacophony of multiple supernatural voices. "This is my trail. These are my walkers." His claws found my left shoulder, tearing through my shirt and opening 4 deep grooves that immediately began bleeding profusely. The pain was instant and absolute, as if every nerve ending in my body had been ignited simultaneously. I screamed and staggered backward, stumbling over one of the pairs of boots in the circle and falling heavily to the ground. Morrison hovered over me, his claws dripping my blood back onto my face, and that's when I heard something that changed everything. The sound of a cell phone ringing. My iPhone 11, with the custom ringtone I had programmed for family emergency calls. The screen showed Jennifer, wife, and a photo of her smiling with our 6-year-old daughter Sophia in her lap. I answered the call with my bloodied hand, and Jennifer's voice came clear and strong from the speaker. "Tyler, honey, are you okay? Your emergency beacon went off and I'm worried. Sophia wants to talk to you." My daughter's voice, sweet and innocent, echoed through the circular area. "Daddy, are you coming home? I made a drawing of you saving people in the forest. Mommy said you're the best ranger in the whole world." Morrison froze completely, his claws stopping centimeters from my chest. In his empty white eyes, I saw something I didn't expect, tears of blood beginning to flow down his decomposed cheeks. "I never," he whispered, his voice now small and broken. I never had a family, never had anyone who cared if I came home. I understood in that moment that it wasn't anger or violence that would break that curse. It was compassion. Morrison wasn't a monster by choice. He was a lonely man who had died alone, searching for a purpose he never found in life, and who was now desperately trying to create meaning through heinous acts. "Daniel," I said softly, using his first name. "You don't need to do this. You can rest now. You can let these people go." The tears of blood came faster now, and I saw his body begin to shake violently. But if I let them go, I'll be alone again. And loneliness hurts more than any physical wound. Jennifer and Sophia were still on the line, and I could hear them talking quietly about when I would get home. I raised the phone so Morrison could hear better. "You're not alone, Daniel. You never were. There are people who care, people who remember the Rangers who gave their lives protecting others. You just need to let go of the fear of not being remembered." Morrison looked at the severed feet around the campfire, and for a long moment hovered there in absolute silence. Then slowly, he extended his bloodied hands, and I saw the claws retracting, returning to normal human fingers, though still decomposed. "Rachel Stone," he said, his voice now barely audible. "She's on the third lap of the Eternal Trail. If I break the curse now, they'll all come back. All those who are still walking." I nodded, still holding the phone where my family continued talking, anchoring me to the reality of love waiting for me at home. "Do it, Daniel. Let them go home." Morrison closed his white eyes and raised his hands to the sky. Words in a language I didn't recognize came from his mouth, and I immediately felt a fundamental change in the surrounding air. The temperature began to rise. Sunlight returned to filter through the trees, and the smell of decomposition was replaced by the clean aroma of pine and recent rain. The campfire went out instantly, and the pairs of boots around it began to disappear one by one, until only Rachel's pink sneakers remained. From deep in the Eternal Trail, I began to hear voices, dozens of them, shouting with relief and running toward the exit. Morrison opened his eyes one last time and looked directly at me. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for reminding me that there's something beyond pain." His body began to dissolve, starting from the feet and moving slowly upward until only his face remained, floating in the air. "Take care of Rachel," were his last words. "She's stronger than she seems." And then he was gone, leaving only a sense of peace, where before there had been only terror. Rachel Stone stumbled out of the opening between the rocks 30 seconds later, her feet bare and bloodied, but alive and relatively whole. When she saw me, she collapsed in tears and ran into my arms, and we both stood there, embracing and crying, while my family continued talking on the phone about dinner plans and how Sophia wanted to show me her new drawing. The path back to the main trail appeared clearly marked, and we managed to reach my truck in 2 hours. Rachel was taken to the hospital for treatment of dehydration and foot injuries, but recovered completely in a week. She never spoke publicly about what happened on the Eternal Trail, but sent me a letter 6 months later that simply said, "Thank you for reminding me that there's always a way home. Bone Creek Trail remains officially closed, but now for environmental conservation reasons instead of public safety. I still do regular patrols of the area, and have never encountered anything supernatural again. Sometimes, however, on particularly clear mornings, I could swear I see a figure in an 80s Forest Service uniform, peacefully patrolling the distant trails, making sure all hikers find their way home safely. And every night when I come home and hug Jennifer and Sophia, I think about Daniel Morrison and how loneliness can transform even the most well-intentioned people into monsters, and how love, even love shared between strangers, can break even the most powerful curses. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Rachel Stone. I read every single one. My name is Ryan Mitchell, and I should have forgotten the case of Alex Morgan. but something brought me back to that cursed forest. It was October 15th, 2018, 3 months after I'd officially closed the file. 3 months since I'd last walked those twisted trails in Olympic National Park, Washington. I was supposed to be done with it. Done with the sleepless nights, done with the questions that had no answers, done with the faces of Alex's parents burning behind my eyelids every time I tried to rest. But here I was, standing at the Hurricane Ridge Visitor Center at 5:47 a.m., my breath forming white clouds in the 42-degree air. The taste of black coffee and regret filled my mouth as I adjusted my Kelty tactical pack, feeling the familiar weight of my Garmin GPS, emergency med kit, and enough supplies for a 3-day search. My Motorola XPR 7550 digital radio crackled with the morning check-ins from other units scattered across the park's 922,000 acres. Unit 23, this is base. What's your 20? The voice belonged to Sarah Chen, our dispatch coordinator. I keyed the mic clipped to my uniform shirt. Base, Unit 23, Hurricane Ridge Trailhead. Beginning independent search pattern Alpha 7. Copy that, 23. Be advised weather service is calling for storm front moving in by 1400 hours. Temperature dropped to 28 degrees, possible snow above 4,000 feet. 10-4, base. What I didn't tell Sarah was why I was really there. The manila envelope in my shirt pocket contained a single photograph that had appeared in my mailbox 2 days ago. No return address, no postmark. Just Alex Morgan's face staring back at me. Except this wasn't the same graduation photo her parents had given me. This Alex looked different, older. Her eyes held a knowledge that 18-year-olds shouldn't possess, and her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. On the back, someone had written in red ink, "She's waiting for you at the old growth loop. She has friends now." I'd run 23 missing person cases in my 12 years as a ranger, found 22 of them, some alive, some not, but I found them. Alex Morgan was my one failure, the case that kept me awake, the one that made me question everything I thought I knew about these woods. The last confirmed sighting placed her on the old growth loop trail at 3:22 p.m. on July 17, 2018. Security footage from the visitor center showed her heading out alone, wearing a red North Face jacket, carrying a small day pack, and sporting the kind of confident smile that said she'd done this hike 100 times before. She had, actually. Alex was a local, born and raised in Port Angeles, daughter of 2 biology professors who'd been bringing her to these trails since she could walk. That's what made her disappearance so goddamn impossible. I started down the familiar path, my Vasquez hiking boots finding their rhythm on the well-worn dirt trail. The October air carried the thick scent of decomposing leaves, wet cedar bark, and something else. Something that made the hair on my arms stand up beneath my uniform sleeves. In 12 years of backcountry work, you develop instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was very, very wrong. The old growth loop was a 2-3-mile trail through some of the most magnificent old-growth forest in the Pacific Northwest. Trees that had been standing when Columbus reached the Americas towered overhead, their trunks so massive that 4 adults holding hands couldn't wrap around them. On a normal day, the forest would be alive with the sounds of Steller's jays, red squirrels, and the distant drumming of pileated woodpeckers. Today, the forest was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of unnatural silence that makes your ears ring and your heart rate spike. I'd been walking for 47 minutes when I reached the spot where Alex's trail went cold. Grid reference, N47 degree 5842, W123 degree 29 2018, elevation 5,147 feet. I knew those coordinates by heart. This was where the search dogs had lost her scent. This was where her footprints simply stopped, as if she'd been plucked from the earth by some invisible hand. No signs of struggle, no torn clothing, no blood, nothing. I pulled out my iPhone 8, noting the 2 bars of signal strength, and opened the photo app to study that mysterious image again. The timestamp showed it was taken 8 days ago, October 7th at 11:33 p.m. The metadata revealed GPS coordinates that made my blood run cold. N47 degree 5842. W123D 2918. The exact spot where I was standing. Jesus Christ, I muttered. my voice unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. That's when I heard it, the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life, a child's laughter, echoing from somewhere deeper in the forest. High-pitched, musical, innocent. The kind of laugh that should have warmed your heart, except it was coming from a section of wilderness where no child should be. The laughter drifted on the wind like smoke, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I keyed my radio. Base Unit 23, requesting immediate backup at grid reference N47 degree Phi 42, W123 Deeg 29 and 18. Possible contact with missing persons. Static. Dead air. I checked my radio, full battery, all systems green. I tried again. Base Unit 23, do you copy? Nothing but white noise, as if someone had wrapped my radio in cotton and buried it underground. The laughter came again, closer this time. I could distinguish at least 3 different voices, 2 girls and a boy, maybe ages 6 to 10. They were calling to each other in that universal playground language of childhood joy, playing some game I couldn't see. My training kicked in. 12 years of search and rescue had taught me that children in the wilderness were a priority 1 emergency. Hypothermia could kill a child in hours. I shouldered my pack and moved toward the sound, my hand instinctively checking the grip of my Glock 22 .40 caliber service weapon. The trail here wasn't maintained. I was pushing through sword ferns and devil's club, following deer paths and hoping I wasn't about to step into a hidden ravine. The laughter kept drifting ahead of me, always just out of sight, leading me deeper into the old growth. That's when the smell hit me. It was subtle at first, a sweet, cloying odor that reminded me of overripe fruit. But as I got closer to the voices, the smell intensified into something that made my stomach clench and my eyes water. It was the smell of decay, of flesh left too long in the heat, of death masked by cheap perfume. I'd smelled it before on my 4th year as a ranger, when I'd found the body of a hiker who'd been missing for 2 weeks. But this was different. This smell was wrong. It was organic decay mixed with something chemical, something artificial that made my sinuses burn and my throat close up. The children's voices were getting louder. I could hear them clearly now, 3 distinct voices calling to each other, playing what sounded like hide and seek among the massive Douglas firs. "Ready or not, here I come," called a little girl's voice, sweet as honey. "I see you, Tommy," giggled another girl. "No fair. You always find me first," protested a boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. I rounded a particularly massive cedar, its trunk easily 12 feet in diameter, and saw them. 3 children playing in a small clearing, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy to illuminate their game. They looked perfectly normal, a blonde girl in a pink dress, a brunette girl in jeans and a t-shirt, and a red-haired boy in shorts and sneakers. They were laughing and running and being exactly what children should be. Except for their eyes. Even from 30 yards away, I could see that their eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils. The entire eye, from corner to corner, was the flat, lifeless black of a shark's eye. And when they moved wrong. Too fluid, too graceful, like marionettes operated by a master puppeteer. The blonde girl in the pink dress turned toward me and smiled. Her teeth were sharp. "Hello, Mr. Mitchell," she said in that same sweet, innocent voice. "We've been waiting for you." The other children stopped playing and turned to face me. 3 pairs of black eyes fixed on mine, and 3 mouths curved into identical predatory smiles. "Alex told us you'd come back," said the brunette girl. "She said you're the kind of man who never gives up. She said you're tough, old school, afraid of nothing natural." The boy giggled. "But this isn't natural, is it, Mr. Mitchell?" My hand was on my weapon before I realized I'd moved. 12 years of training, thousands of hours of muscle memory, and every instinct I'd developed in the wilderness were screaming at me to run. But I was Ryan Mitchell, senior park ranger, and I didn't run from anything in these woods. "Where is Alex Morgan?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the ice water flowing through my veins. The children laughed in perfect unison, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, she's very close," said the blonde girl. "Would you like to see her?" Without waiting for an answer, she pointed behind me. I spun around, my hand clearing leather and bringing my Glock to bear on nothing. Empty forest, but the smell was stronger now, so powerful that tears were streaming down my face and bile was rising in my throat. When I turned back, the children were gone. Not hidden, not moved to a different position. Gone, as if they'd never been there at all. The clearing was empty except for the dappled sunlight and the oppressive silence. I stood there for a full minute, weapon drawn, scanning the forest for any sign of movement. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a caged animal and sweat was pouring down my back despite the October chill. My hands were shaking, actually shaking, and I couldn't make them stop. In 12 years as a ranger, I'd faced charging black bears, aggressive mountain cats, armed poachers, and drug runners using the backcountry as their personal highway. I'd rappelled down cliff faces in lightning storms and pulled bodies out of rushing rivers in the dead of winter. Nothing had ever made my hands shake. But those children, those things with Alex's message. My radio crackled to life. Unit 23, this is base. We're showing you off the grid. What's your current position? I keyed the mic with a trembling finger. Base, Unit 23. I'm on the old growth loop, approximately 1 mile past the standard trail termination. Grid reference. I checked my GPS. The display was showing impossible coordinates. NO0 D00 BO0. Base, I'm having equipment malfunction. GPS is not functioning properly. Copy that, 23. Are you requesting immediate extraction? The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. The answer that would let me go home to my wife Jennifer and my 8-year-old daughter Megan, kiss them both and forget this day ever happened was yes. Negative, base. Continuing search pattern. We'll check in every 30 minutes. 10-4, Unit 23. Be safe out there. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Ryan Mitchell's situation? Comment below. I holstered my weapon and continued deeper into the forest, following what might have been a game trail or might have been something else entirely. The smell of decay was getting stronger, and now I could hear something new. A low humming sound, like a children's choir singing just below the range of human hearing. The trees were getting larger, older, more twisted. Some of these giants had to be over 1,000 years old, their bark scarred by centuries of fire and storm and earthquake. They seemed to lean inward, creating a natural cathedral that blocked out most of the remaining daylight. I checked my watch. 8:43 a.m. I'd been walking for less than 3 hours, but it felt like I'd been in these woods for days. The temperature was dropping, and my breath was visible in the increasingly frigid air. According to my thermometer, it was now 31 degrees, a 20-degree drop in less than an hour. That's when I found the camp. It was situated in another small clearing, this one dominated by the massive stump of an ancient cedar that must have been cut down decades ago. The stump was easily 20 feet across and 8 feet high, its flat top blackened by old fires. Arranged around it in a perfect circle were 7 small tents, each one bright yellow and brand new. Children's tents. Coleman youth camping tents, sized for ages 6 to 12. My blood turned to ice water. I approached the nearest tent, my Glock back in my hand, and called out in my most authoritative voice. Olympic National Park Service, if there's anyone in the tents, please identify yourselves. Silence. I knelt beside the first tent and carefully unzipped the entrance. Inside was a small sleeping bag, a child's backpack, and a collection of toys. A teddy bear, some picture books, and a small wooden cross that looked hand-carved. Everything was clean, new, arranged with the kind of meticulous care that suggested someone had been maintaining this camp for a long time. The second tent contained similar items, but these belonged to a different child, a girl, based on the pink sleeping bag and collection of small dolls. The third tent, same story. 7 tents, 7 children's worth of camping gear, all maintained in perfect condition, but no children. I keyed my radio. Base Unit 23. I've discovered what appears to be an unauthorized camping area. 7 tents appears to be a youth group. No occupants present. requesting immediate backup and investigation team. Static. Then, after a long pause, Unit 23 base. Did you say 7 tents? Affirmative. Children's camping gear. Appears to have been here for some time, but well maintained. Another pause, longer this time. Unit 23. We have no permits for youth camping in that area. No registered groups, no approved campsites. That section is designated wilderness preservation only. I felt something cold crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. Base, are you saying this camp is completely unauthorized? That's affirmative, 23. You need to treat this as a potential illegal occupation. Exercise extreme caution and withdraw to a safe distance until backup arrives. But I wasn't withdrawing. Not when Alex Morgan's case file was burning a hole in my shirt pocket. Not when I'd just seen 3 impossible children with black eyes and sharp teeth. Not when everything in my gut was telling me that these tents were connected to her disappearance. I moved to the center of the camp, where the massive cedar stump dominated the clearing. Up close, I could see that the blackened surface wasn't just from old fires. There were symbols carved into the wood, crude, angular shapes that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to squirm and shift when I wasn't looking straight at them, like optical illusions that played tricks on your peripheral vision. And the smell was overwhelming here. Sweet decay mixed with something else, something that reminded me of burning hair and copper pennies. I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from vomiting. That's when I noticed the dark stains on the stump's surface. They were concentrated around a circular depression in the center, about 2 feet across and 6 inches deep. The depression looked artificial, carved out of the solid wood with tools, and the stains. I'd seen enough crime scenes to recognize dried blood when I saw it. But this wasn't just blood. This was blood mixed with other things, other fluids, creating a dark brown crust that covered the entire depression and radiated outward in deliberate patterns. The symbols around the edge weren't just carved. They were burned into the wood, branded with something hot enough to char cedar. And in the very center of the depression, almost hidden by the accumulated stains, was something that made my heart stop. A small gold locket on a delicate chain. I recognized it immediately. Alex Morgan's parents had shown me dozens of photographs during the initial investigation, and in every single one, Alex was wearing that locket. It had been her grandmother's, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations. With shaking hands, I pulled a pair of latex gloves from my pack and carefully extracted the locket from its resting place. It was heavier than it should have been, and warm to the touch despite the freezing air. The delicate chain was broken, as if it had been torn from her neck with considerable force. I opened the locket. Inside was the photograph I expected, Alex with her parents on her graduation day, all smiles and bright futures. But the photo had been altered. Someone had carefully scratched out her parents' faces with something sharp, leaving only Alex's image intact. And Alex's image was moving. Not moving like a GIF or video, moving like she was alive inside the photograph, trapped behind the glass trying to get out. Her mouth was opening and closing soundlessly. Her eyes were darting back and forth in panic, and her hands were pressed against the inner surface of the locket as if she were pounding on a window. I dropped the locket like it was on fire. It hit the stump with a metallic clink and snapped shut, but I could swear I heard a tiny muffled scream as it closed. "What the fuck?" I whispered, and my voice echoed strangely in the clearing as if the words were being repeated by invisible mouths all around me. That's when the children came back. They emerged from the forest like smoke, materializing between the trees without a sound. Not just the 3 I'd seen before. 7 children, 1 for each tent. They formed a circle around me and the stump, their black eyes reflecting what little light filtered through the canopy. The blonde girl in the pink dress stepped forward, and I could see now that her dress wasn't pink at all. It had been white once, but it was stained with something dark and sticky that had dried to a rust-colored brown. When she smiled, I could see that her sharp teeth were stained the same color. "You found her locket," she said in that sweet, innocent voice. "She dropped it when we brought her here for the ceremony." "What ceremony?" I demanded, my weapon trained on the center of her chest. Not that it would do any good. I was starting to understand that bullets wouldn't stop whatever these things were. The boy with red hair giggled. The ceremony where she joined us, Mr. Mitchell. The ceremony where she stopped being Alex Morgan and started being something much more useful. Another girl, this one wearing a torn blue dress, clapped her hands together. She fought so hard. It was wonderful to watch. She kept screaming your name, actually. Ryan will find me, she kept saying. Ryan Mitchell never gives up. Even when we were cutting her, even when we were draining her, even when we were filling her with something else. The children began to move closer, their circle tightening around me and the blood-stained stump. I could smell them now. That same sweet decay, but stronger, more concentrated. It was the smell of things that should have been buried long ago. You see, Mr. Mitchell, said the blonde girl, we've been waiting here for a very long time. Decades, since 1966 when the congregation brought us here for our own ceremony. We were about the same age as Alex when they cut us open and filled us with the old hunger. We've been so very, very hungry since then. I was backing toward the edge of the clearing, my weapon moving from child to child, knowing it was useless but unable to stop myself. You're dead. You're all dead. Children don't live in the forest for 50 years. They laughed in unison again, that sound like breaking glass. Oh, we're not alive, Mr. Mitchell, said the boy. But we're not exactly dead either. We're something in between, something that feeds on fear and pain and the life force of people who come looking for lost children. The brunette girl in jeans and a t-shirt tilted her head to one side, her neck bending at an impossible angle. Alex was delicious, young, healthy, full of life and hope and dreams. We drained every drop of her essence before we filled her up with our own purpose. And what purpose is that, I asked, my back now against the trunk of a massive Douglas fir. 7 identical smiles spread across 7 innocent faces. To bring more food to the congregation, of course. Alex is out there right now, somewhere in these woods, looking just like she did the day she disappeared. Young, beautiful, helpless. And when the next searcher finds her, when the next Good Samaritan tries to help her, she'll lead them right back here to us. The temperature was dropping even faster now. My breath was coming out in thick white clouds and frost was forming on the tents and tree branches around the clearing. The children seemed unaffected by the cold. But then again, I was starting to understand that the laws of nature didn't apply to them. She's been so successful, continued the blonde girl. In the 3 months since her ceremony, Alex has brought us 6 more people, a family of 4 from California, an elderly couple from Portland. All of them came looking for the poor lost girl they'd seen wandering in the woods. All of them ended up right here, feeding our eternal hunger. I thought about the photo in my pocket, the image of Alex with that too wide smile and knowing eyes. How many copies had been sent out? How many other searchers, law enforcement officers, Good Samaritans had received mysterious photographs and come looking for her? How many had found this clearing and never left? The boy stepped forward, his head tilted at the same impossible angle as the brunette girl. But you're special, Mr. Mitchell. You're the one who never gave up. You're the one she talked about during her final moments. Ryan will save me, she kept saying, even as we were pulling her soul out through her eyes. The children began to move in closer, their circle tightening like a noose. I could see now that their clothes weren't just stained, they were rotting. The fabric was falling apart, revealing pale mottled skin underneath that looked like it had been underwater for months. She wants to see you again, said the blonde girl. She's been waiting so patiently for you to come back. She has so much to tell you about what it's like on the other side of death. That's when I heard her voice. Ryan, is that you? Alex Morgan's voice, calling from somewhere deeper in the forest. The same voice I'd heard on the family's voicemails during the initial investigation. The same voice that had laughed with her parents when they'd played me recordings from her childhood. I'm here, Ryan. I'm hurt. I need help. The children's smiles grew wider, impossibly wide, stretching their faces into grotesque masks. Go on, Mr. Mitchell, whispered the blonde girl. She's waiting for you. She has so much to show you. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to empty my magazine into these impossible children, to turn around and sprint back through the forest until I reached my truck, to drive straight home and hold my wife and daughter and never let them go. But I was Ryan Mitchell. I was the fearless ranger, the one who never gave up, the one who brought people home. And somewhere out there in the darkness, Alex Morgan was calling my name. I holstered my weapon and started walking toward her voice. The children parted to let me pass, their laughter following me as I left the clearing and headed deeper into the forest. Behind me, I could hear them breaking camp, moving the tents, preparing for the next searcher who would inevitably come looking for me. "Ryan, over here! Please, I can't move!" Her voice was getting closer. I pushed through sword ferns and around massive tree trunks, following the sound through the unnaturally dark forest. The temperature had dropped below freezing now, and ice was forming on every surface. My breath hung in the air like fog, and my fingers were going numb despite my insulated gloves. I found her in another clearing, this one smaller and darker than the camp. She was sitting with her back against a fallen log, wearing the same red North Face jacket she'd had on the day she disappeared. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her face was exactly as I remembered it from the photographs, except for her eyes. Like the children, Alex's eyes were completely black, and when she smiled at me, her teeth were sharp and stained with something dark. "Ryan," she said, and her voice was exactly right, exactly as it should be. "I knew you'd come back for me. I knew you'd never give up." I stopped about 10 feet away from her, my hand resting on my weapon again. "Alex, are you all right?" She laughed, and it was the same musical laugh I'd heard on the family videos. "Oh, Ryan, I'm so much better than all right. I'm perfect now. I'm exactly what I was always meant to be." She stood up, moving with that same fluid grace I'd seen in the children. "Do you want to know what happened to me, Ryan? Do you want to know what it was like when they cut me open and pulled out everything that made me human?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was full of sand. "It was beautiful," she continued, stepping closer. "The pain was so pure, so clean. And when they filled me up with their hunger, their purpose, their eternal need, I finally understood what I was really for." Another step closer. I could smell her now. That same sweet decay. That smell of death masked by perfume. "I'm here to feed them, Ryan. I'm here to bring them strong, healthy people who taste of hope and determination and love for their families. People like you." She was close enough to touch now, close enough that I could see the black veins spreading out from her eyes like spider webs, close enough that I could see the small puncture wounds in her neck where something had drained her blood. "Your wife Jennifer is beautiful, Ryan. Your daughter Megan is precious. 8 years old, right? Just the right age for the children to play with." Ice flooded my veins. "You stay away from my family." Alex tilted her head, her neck bending at that same impossible angle. "But Ryan, they're part of this now. When you don't come home tonight, when you don't answer your radio tomorrow, Jennifer will come looking for you, and she'll bring Megan because Megan will insist on helping find Daddy. They always do." She reached out with one pale hand and touched my cheek. Her skin was ice cold and felt like wet leather, and when they find me wandering in the woods, lost and scared and crying for help, they'll trust me. Because I'm the girl you died trying to save. I'm proof that sometimes the good guys really do win. The rage that filled me was hotter than anything I'd ever felt. It burned away the fear, burned away the supernatural dread, burned away everything except the absolute certainty that this thing, whatever it was, would never, ever touch my family. I grabbed Alex's wrist and twisted, feeling the bones snap like dry wood. She laughed as I spun her around and slammed her face first into the nearest tree trunk. "You can't kill me, Ryan," she said, her voice muffled by the bark. "I'm already dead. We're all already dead." "Maybe," I said, pulling out my service knife and pressing the blade against her throat. "But I can sure as hell try." That's when something inside me awakened. It started as a warmth in my chest, right over my heart. The warmth spread outward, flowing through my arms and legs like liquid fire. And with the warmth came power, understanding, the absolute knowledge that I was not helpless, that I was not prey, that I had something these creatures feared. Love. Not just love, but the kind of love that would move mountains to protect what mattered most. The love I felt for Jennifer when she smiled at me across the breakfast table. The love I felt for Megan when she crawled into my lap to read bedtime stories. The love I felt for every lost soul I'd brought home safely over 12 years of service. That love was a weapon these things couldn't defend against. Alex screamed as the blade touched her throat, but it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of terror, of something encountering its natural enemy. White light poured from the wound, and wherever the light touched her skin, she began to dissolve like smoke. "No!" she shrieked, her voice distorting into something inhuman. "You can't. You don't understand what you're fighting." "I understand perfectly," I said, and my voice was steady now, calm, filled with the kind of certainty that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're willing to die for. You're parasites. You feed on fear and despair and hopelessness. But I'm not afraid anymore. The white light was spreading, consuming Alex's stolen form and revealing something else underneath. Something twisted and dark and ancient that hurt to look at directly. But I didn't look away. I held that blade steady and let the love I felt for my family burn through it like electricity. "The congregation will come for you." The thing wearing Alex's face hissed as it dissolved. "They'll come for your wife, your daughter, everyone you've ever loved. You can't protect them all." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I can try. And sometimes that's enough." Alex's form collapsed into ash and shadow, leaving only the smell of burning sulfur and the echo of her inhuman scream. But even as she dissolved, I could hear the children coming through the forest, their innocent laughter growing closer and more urgent. I started running. Behind me, the laughter turned to shrieks of rage as they discovered what was left of their primary bait. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, moving faster than any human child ever could, their voices no longer sweet and innocent but raw and predatory. I burst through the forest like a man possessed, my pack bouncing against my back, my radio crackling with increasingly frantic calls from base. The white light was still flowing through me, and wherever my feet touched the ground, the frost melted and the unnatural cold retreated. Unit 23, please respond. We're showing massive electromagnetic interference in your area." I keyed the mic without slowing down. "Base, Unit 23. I'm en route to Extraction Point Alpha. Have medical and law enforcement standing by." "Copy that, 23. ETA to extraction?" I could see daylight ahead, real daylight, not the false twilight that had surrounded the camp.
15 minutes. And base? Contact FBI field office in Seattle. Tell them we need a supernatural crimes unit. 23. Did you say supernatural crimes? You heard me right. And base, I'm coming in hot with multiple hostiles in pursuit. Clear the area and have backup ready. I broke through the tree line and into real sunlight at exactly 11:47 a.m.
My truck was waiting in the parking lot, and so were 6 other Ranger vehicles, 2 FBI units, and what looked like a military transport truck with no markings. A woman in a dark suit was waiting by my truck, mid-40s, short blonde hair, the kind of professional demeanor that screamed federal agent. "Ranger Mitchell?" she called as I approached. "Special Agent Sarah Morrison, FBI Paranormal Investigations Unit. We've been monitoring unusual activity in this area for several months." I stopped running and tried to catch my breath. "Agent Morrison, there's a cult operating in those woods. They've been using murdered children as bait to lure victims to some kind of ritual site." She nodded grimly. "We know. We've been tracking similar disappearances across 7 national parks in the Pacific Northwest. You're the first person to make contact and survive." "There are more?" 17 confirmed sites, probably more. The cult calls itself the Congregation of the Eternal Hunger. They've been operating since the 1960s, moving from park to park, using the children they've murdered as... She paused, searching for the right word. "As recruitment tools." I thought about Alex, about the way she'd dissolved into ash and shadow when confronted with something stronger than fear. How do we stop them? Agent Morrison smiled, and there was something cold and determined in her expression that reminded me of myself. "We burn them out, Ranger Mitchell. Every site, every ritual circle, every possessed child, we burned them all. She handed me a business card. But first, you need to go home. Kiss your wife, hug your daughter, remind yourself why you're fighting. Because tomorrow we're going back in there, and this time we're bringing enough firepower to turn that entire section of forest into a parking lot. I looked back at the tree line where I could still hear the faint echo of children's laughter drifting on the wind. Somewhere in those woods, the real Alex Morgan was finally at rest. And somewhere else, other children were waiting to be saved from their eternal nightmare. I got in my truck and started the engine. Jennifer was making her famous meatloaf tonight, and Megan had a soccer game at 6 p.m. For the first time in 3 months, I was going to be home in time for both. But tomorrow I was going back into those woods, and this time I wasn't going alone. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Alex Morgan. I read every single one. The true events described in this account occurred in October 2018. Ranger Ryan Mitchell was awarded the Medal of Valor for his actions during the investigation. The Congregation of the Eternal Hunger case remains classified, but 7 ritual sites were successfully located and destroyed in coordinated operations between the National Park Service and FBI Paranormal Investigations Unit. No further disappearances matching the cult's pattern have been reported in the Pacific Northwest since December 2018. Alex Morgan's parents were informed that their daughter's remains were recovered and that her killers were brought to justice. They were not told the specific details of her fate. Some truths are too heavy for civilian hearts to bear. Ranger Mitchell continues to serve with the Olympic National Park Service, specializing in cases involving unexplained disappearances. He lives in Port Angeles with his wife Jennifer and daughter Megan, who is now 11 years old and wants to be a park ranger just like her dad. If you're planning to visit any national park and encounter children alone in the wilderness, especially children who seem too friendly or too eager to lead you somewhere safe, do not follow them. Contact park authorities immediately. And remember, sometimes the most innocent faces hide the darkest hungers.